Welcome to Grow My Home and our next expert session. Today we are here. My name is Johnny. I'm from Grow My Home. We have also Nissi Ekpot. He is founder of Grow My Home and he is my co-host from South Africa today. And we have as our expert guest today Grant Smith from the UK. And thank you very much for taking your time and we'll hear from you in a minute.
Hi.
So the last two times we looked at rent to own, we looked at the topic of fractional real estate investing, and today we want to look more at a specific country. Although the principles are largely the same wherever you look about real estate, but we want to focus in on Kenya, and especially, of course, at investing into real estate in Kenya. And as a German, Kenya is an important country in Africa, it seems, also politically, but it's a key country on the African continent in general. And before we come to the specifics, Grant, you have lived a rich life, I would say, and you could tell so many stories, and I've heard many of them, or at least some of them. And you even wrote a book, but we come to that later. We talk about that book later. But tell us a little bit what was your exposure, your experience in real estate, and especially in relation to Kenya. What did you do? What are you doing right now? Why do we call you an expert? Because you are for us. Tell us a little bit about yourself in relation to what we're talking about today.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. So first of all, let's go right back to school. And the only thing I could do at school was maths. And that automatically led to being an accountant. And the thought of being an accountant just did not inspire me at all. And so I went to the careers officer and I said, I like maths, but I don't want to be an accountant. And the careers officer said, have you thought about quantity surveying? Well, I'd never heard of what a quantity surveyor was, and possibly none of you have, or many of you haven't either. But fundamentally, a quantity surveyor counts bricks. And I thought, yeah, that's nice. It's a balance between working on site and working in the office, and it appealed to me. And so I went and did a degree in quantity surveying, and I worked for some national companies in the UK. And then when I was 28, I formed my own consultancy. So that's my background in construction, which over the years has spilled over into project management as well. Then with regards to how I've become in Kenya, 28 years ago, two friends of mine asked me if I'd start a charity called Hand in Hand. And I said no. And they said, why not? And I said, because there's plenty of good Christian charities out there. And what's the point in reinventing the wheel? And so they challenged me to go and see the project they wanted to support, which was in Brazil. And I went and I met a man called Macondas, who could have been a very wealthy businessman. But he'd given his life to the 300 kids from the favela. And across the road, he had basically built an oasis. And you walked through the doors and it was whitewashed walls and it was palm trees and a little swimming pool, and was just giving these children a hope for the future that they couldn't otherwise have had. And I thought to myself, I cannot say to this man, Macondas, look you in the eye and say, I'm not prepared to help. And so I came home to Pete and Dave, who were the friends that asked me in the first place, and we formed Hand in Hand as an NGO, supporting this project in Brazil. The following year, I led a youth team to Kenya, and we went to two projects. And as a consequence of that visit, two of the young lads who were with me said they would like to start up a charity to support one of the projects that we visited. And I thought to myself, no, why don't they just become trustees of Hand in Hand? Because most people give to specific causes. They don't actually just give into a black hole of a charity called Hand in Hand. And so you can raise money for this project under the umbrella of Hand in Hand. You don't have all the admin and registration issues, but the project benefits. And so that's how we then had a project in Kenya. And our philosophy was that we always supported what local people were doing, where they were already responding to poverty. And then we would support what they were doing. And two years later, we were sponsoring two young boys into their education. And I was in their house, which was a tin shed, a slum house in Dagoretti Market. And I was talking to their mother. And as I was chatting to the mother, I thought to myself, do these two boys aspire to anything more than this tin shed? And one of the big challenges in Kenya is the level of unemployment. And as I walked away from that house, felt to myself, can we create employment that pays people at the lower end a bit better? And that was 26 years ago. And so I actually, 25 years ago, I met a man called Peter Njero, a Kenyan. We became business partners and we've been business partners ever since. And we've had a few different businesses that we've run with the whole focus of trying to create fairer paid employment, which has eventually ended up in us purely focusing in construction, where we have fairer paid employment because I sit on the board of a construction company where we pay our workers according to what they do rather than a day rate. Now that in the UK is quite common. In Kenya, it's not the way they operate. And by our structure, a hardworking person can earn double or treble the day rate. A lazy person will earn nothing, and I can't help that person. So we're focused on facilitating artisans and construction workers to earn more money and also to have a strong apprenticeship program.
Wow, thank you very much, Grant. We heard a lot about your heart. It seems you are doing this for people and not for the money and not for the business itself. And I love that. It's also our heart. But you have almost been underplayed. I mean, you are still an expert in the whole construction because that was what you were doing. Your heartbeat seems to be the people, but you have quite some knowledge in handling projects and building houses and all the Kenyan market and real estate, right?
Yeah, so I've been in construction for 40 years, both in the UK. After I became a consultant quantity surveyor, I actually carried on, although we began the business in Kenya playing both roles. So I was a consultant quantity surveyor effectively in the UK that was financing or subsidizing financing the work in Kenya. And in Kenya, we have undertaken many construction projects. Peter Njero, my business partner, is a civil engineer, and we built 120 houses down near the airport. We built a 16-story building just around the rear of Yaya for people that know Kenya. We built an affordable project in Embu, which is 2 hours out of Nairobi. So yeah, we have extensive experience, and the way we work is that we formed a company called Bricken East Africa, Peter and I, and we basically bring together consultants, the QS, the architect, the structural engineer, the mechanical and electrical engineer, and we coordinate these people in order to procure and design a project and then see the project through. But then in addition, as I said, I sit on the board of a Kenyan construction company, and we don't always employ them. Sometimes we go out to the market, but they have structured themselves, as I've explained, in order to facilitate a person to earn more money, but it doesn't cost the project anymore because they're working on a piecemeal. But you say about how that I've shown my heart as I talk. When I was a consultant quantity surveyor, I would think I'd probably earn double or possibly treble the money that I earn now. And that the challenge of doing business in Kenya it is exceptional. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mhm. Oh, that's exactly where we wanted you. And thank you so much for taking the time to answer some of our questions, or actually the questions of those who are listening, who are watching. And Nissi, we have heard from you the last two times in our expert session, quite some bit of your experience, of your decades-long experience. So we skipped the intro for time's sake. But you know, and you yourself are actually living in the diaspora to start this word that I didn't know beforehand necessarily, except from the Bible. But there's a diaspora out there, people who live in other countries that is not their home countries and who didn't, not migrants necessarily, but more people choosing to live there. And you yourself, as Nigerian, are in the diaspora, basically in South Africa. So, and also you're in constant contact with people who are living there. And so you really know these questions well. And we're looking forward to hear some of those questions and even more the answers that will get to those questions. We are Grow My Home, making real estate affordable. That's our slogan. And we talk about affordable real estate. And that means we look at the lower or middle segment of housing and especially residential. That's what we do. Since many of you who are listening and watching are looking for a house for yourself or your relatives, but others are also interested maybe in diversifying. And for that, Kenya is also a good market. And let's start off, Grant, with a little bit of introduction to Kenya in relation to that. Is it, we think it is, but why is Kenya a good investment place for real estate? And what are general things that might be good to know if people start, oh, that's interesting, Kenya real estate. Give us some introduction. I know it's a broad question, but just something what people would be interested who are not necessarily from Kenya or live abroad and want to invest or want to build. Just something on top of your head that you can think of that is important.
Okay, so I mean, Kenya has a growing population, and therefore, naturally, that means there is a growing demand for housing. The rental section is significant in Kenya, and basically that means that people will live mainly in the cities. In the rural areas, people tend to own their own properties, but in the cities, they will tend to rent eternally and own nothing at the end of it. Currently, the mortgage market is extremely small. In fact, the statistics, if you explore, there's only somewhere in the region of 35,000 mortgages currently active in Kenya. And part of the challenge in Kenya is that 86% of the population work in what is classified as the informal sector. And what that means is they don't have a payslip. And what that means is that if you want to get a mortgage or a loan in order to buy a property, then you've got no actual credibility because you can't produce your salary slips. However, the upside is that many Kenyans will belong to what they call a circle. And so that's a group of people. I mean, it started off almost in village units, but a group of people that will save together in order to be able to purchase something. But because it's a group of people that you know, you're accountable to each other, and therefore the level of default is extremely small. But of course, as you can appreciate, purchasing an apartment or a house takes a significant capital cost. So in answer to your question, one, there is significant demand and there is growing demand. Two, what I've witnessed in Nairobi is there is large developers tend to want to build luxury properties, and there's demand for those luxury properties. But they will be selling for in the region of $200,000-300,000. So how do you facilitate a person in the middle level to actually be able to have an asset in a home that they are buying if they don't have access to a mortgage, but they do have income, but they are basically committed, or their only route that they can go down is to eternally rent.
Thank you. Nisi, I want to tap. You've been to Kenya several times. You know the country pretty well. You know Africa as a continent pretty well. Can you add something? What are some key things that might be interesting for our listeners? You know them. Just add something in general to Kenya from your perspective.
Thanks, Johnny. That's an interesting one. I thought I was going to ask Grant a question, and when I became the one who asked. But one of the things I observed about Kenya is that it's a very fast growing economic from an African context. It's an African economic powerhouse, and for many years, Kenya actually used to be like the SI unit for Africa. So if you were in the West and people were talking about Africa, it would be Kenya. So, but what that means, having you or a grant here who are non-Africans who are working in Africa or talking to the diaspora, means that Kenya is a very good entry spot for the international community into Africa in terms of collaborations and business and stuff like that. If it works in Kenya, or if you wanted to work in Africa, Kenya is one of the doorways. I would put it that way. And then the other thing is that in recent years, with many shifts in global affairs, there is a lot of moving of international institutions to Kenya as a headquarters, which then means that it's actually even more going to become an economic engine. So I always get very fascinated when we deal with Kenya, when I have an opportunity to visit the country or do business in Kenya. So it's nice to be listening to it from Grant's perspective, from a 25-year perspective.
Thank you, Nissim. Kenya, Kenya is a fast-growing tech country, I would say. They're very much known now more and more for the tech development, and they have a very young population, as many African countries, but also Kenya. Young population, growing, innovative. But still, we notice, or I have noticed in my few years there in engaging, people often get stuck in the past, at least in their mindset. And there are opportunities, and I think if you look broadly, there are many. And but Grant, what are opportunities you see, and what mindsets, a common belief, block people actually from taking advantage of those opportunities? Because they are there, and often there's the gap in what you can do, but you somehow think you can't. But things have changed, or there's new products, new developments. I don't know whether I phrased my question well. What are the mindsets that you see that are sometimes blocking people inside Kenya, or even people from who want to invest from outside into doing something or moving forward?
Yeah, so I would make a couple of comments in response to that. First of all, I have never been out of work in my life. I've driven delivery vans. I've worked in garden centers. My first job when I was 13, I delivered newspapers. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and delivered newspapers in the local area. And my attitude has always been that even if I can't get a job as a quantity surveyor, I will do something. I will find something in order to generate money. And I talked to, as you might imagine, over the years, I've developed some very good friends in Kenya. And so I shared that perspective with a good friend of mine, Timothy, in Kenya, and said, how do you react to that? I.e., is it the same here? And his response was yes. He said, if you want to work, if you are ready to think outside the box, there is always something that you can do. And so often I think that, and I don't think this is just a Kenyan problem, I think we're almost restricted in the box that we've built ourselves. Whereas if you look at the potential of opportunity, then there are always so many different things that you can attempt to do. They may not pay that well initially, but just having the idea of attempting to do something, and you may fail. There's no problem with failing. We all tend to think failure is, crumbs. If I do something and I fail, then that is just disastrous. And of course, it's not good. I'm not suggesting it's good. But you mentioned my book, which obviously is a very good book. But in that book, I explain of all the bad decisions that we've made. I explain the mistakes that we've made. I explain the cash flow challenges that we've had. Because in business, you make mistakes. And the challenge of business is how you get over those mistakes. It's not just sitting down and shutting the door and saying, okay, I'll go home because I've made a mistake. It's actually having the wherewithal to think outside that box and to apply yourself. And so therefore, I believe, and in conversation with my friend Timothy, I believe that there is opportunity in Kenya if you're prepared to apply yourself. Now, I'll give you an illustration. We are wanting to develop, in addition to the construction business, an accountancy business in Kenya. And the reason for that is because my son is an accountant. And he would like to do something similar to what we're doing in construction. He would like to employ Kenyans who are qualified in accountancy, where we would get clients in the UK and pay accountants in Kenya fairly. And so we employed our first one, Bernard, and I was chatting to him, and he was sponsored by Comic Relief. Comic Relief is a big charity in the UK. And he did a degree in business economics, the same as my son. And when he finished that degree, he couldn't get a job in accountancy. So he went and got a job as a cleaner. And he worked for 2 or 3 years as a cleaner. And then from there, he went and got a job in a factory. And he worked for some time as in a factory. And from there, he got a job in insurance. And from there, he's come to work for Hand in Hand. What that tells you is that that same attitude of opportunity is always there. Would you really want to do a degree and become a cleaner? The answer is no, you probably wouldn't. But he saw that as an opportunity to show, to demonstrate that he had workability, that he was committed, and therefore there is that opportunity there if you're prepared to apply yourself.
Wow, we got motivation from you, definitely life principles. You always get that for free with Grant. Thank you very much. So that is very cool. I still need to dig a bit more now. That was a general life principle, and I agree with you, and I'm inspired and maybe challenged. But can you apply this to real estate investing? What is there? Where do you see the opportunities that we might or people might miss?
So fundamentally, land always goes up in value. There might be a short-term dip because the market has overcooked, and people have been prepared to, particularly in the cities, they've been prepared to pay more money than probably they should have done, and then it levels out. But overall, if you buy a piece of land on day one, on year 10, I'll guarantee to you that land will have gone up in value. So land is always a safe investment. Now, of course, the challenge in Kenya is whether you know you've got the right title, because there are hundreds of stories of people that thought that they owned a piece of land, and then it turned out that actually they didn't have the correct title, and so you have to know who to deal with in order to make sure that you've got the clean title to your land. So that's step one within construction, is what you build on. And therefore, if land is always going to go up in value, then construction values, sale values, are always going to go up. Now, clearly with inflation, and of course we have a significant challenge at the moment, which we don't know the full impact of, is I think we're going to see a spike in the next few months of material prices going up significantly because of the cost of fuel, etc. Now, we saw that happen about 3 years ago in Kenya, and then it leveled back out again. And I think we're going to see the same thing happening again. But the encouraging part about construction is that the market then always follows the costs. You do not get yourself into a situation, or certainly in my 26 years of experience, you do not get yourself into a situation where your costs do not facilitate a market price in order to make a return. The market price is driven by the cost factor. Now, if you're a very bad contractor or you're a very bad project manager, you can waste money and lose it from that perspective. But providing you're doing your job properly, the market will always respond to the cost point. And therefore you would always be able to make a margin in construction. Of course, then the challenge is that if land goes up due to demand, particularly in the cities, then what you actually end up doing is pricing lower income people out of a property, because not because of the cost of construction, but because of the cost of land. So, for example, right now in the center of Nairobi, an acre of land would be in the region of $5 million. Now that has gone up in the last 20 years multiple times. And I would say in the last 5 years, it is kind of stabilized. But you made the point, Nissi, of international organizations making their home in Nairobi or in Kenya. The UN, as I understand it, have just closed down their other offices in other countries and are focused completely in Kenya. That alone will have an impact on land prices because of the buying power, if you like, of the UN. I think I've drifted off the question, Johnny. Sorry about that.
That's totally fine. I even would like to give it to Nissi to add, because he is from our viewers or potential customers' perspective. Nissi, what are questions like that came up as you listened to Grant? What are potential questions our people listening and watching might be interested you want to ask in behalf of them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good one. I think one of the things that I got inspired by when I've known Grant for some years now was when he talked about how to get people to be able to buy homes and pay $40 a month. I'll not forget that. It challenged my thinking. So my question would be, in the light of the opportunities in real estate, in the light of the growth in land, in the light of some of the things he's talked about, what would he say about the entry points? Real estate always it's reputed to have a very high entry point, but Grant's vision was to help people to start from $40 So what would you say to people, value in terms of starting from a low entry point? Are there opportunities there? Is there potential there? Is that something someone should think of, or should they just give up and say that doesn't work?
Yeah. So thank you, Nishi. So we run a rent to own scheme, as Johnny referenced at the beginning of this discussion, and we were with our Embu project, which is 35 apartments. We basically, because it's a very new concept in Kenya, I'm not convinced that our marketing people fully understood. And part of the reason why they didn't fully understand was because they could see that we weren't maximizing our potential return. We were making return, but I don't think they'd ever met a developer like us, where they were. We were trying to explain that you can pay the rental value on a rent to own scheme, maybe a little bit higher. We would charge an interest rate, obviously, because of the fact that they're effectively you're facilitating them to have a loan, although it's not a loan per se, because you actually own the property until they've made all their payments. But we were proposing an interest rate of 8%, but fundamentally, what that's doing is, instead of having a 20% deposit, which is probably what a mortgage company would request, and then you're paying in Kenya right now, you're paying between 18 and 21% on a mortgage, which probably explains why there's only 35,000 of them. You can come in without having a massive savings pot, and you can be paying a little bit more than you'd be paying in rent. And therefore, that's making it accessible to such a wide audience. It's not that you have to be earning a certain level in order to be able to own a property. Now, on the structure that we had, it could be a 25-year payback period. And these were 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Nobody is going to live in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, well, it's unlikely, for 25 years. But what they are doing is from day one, they are growing an asset. And so if they leave after 5 years because now they need somewhere bigger, or they bought a piece of land, or whatever, they're leaving with cash in their pocket. And that's the significant difference with rent to own, is that you're giving them an access point which they can afford. And yet, whereas their expectation and cultural norm is that you rent eternally and all you do is make the landlord rich, is in actual fact we are making money as a developer, but they are also growing an asset. If you Google apartments for sale in Embu, you won't find any. And the reason for it is because the developers don't consider that it's worthwhile going 2 hours out of Nairobi in order to build apartments. So the only people that are building apartments in Embu are people that basically are from Embu, who own land in Embu, and they're building their retirement pot. So they are doing it with a perspective of, let's build a few houses on my land, get a passive income, and that can continue on when I retire from the civil service or wherever. So nobody is actually thinking proactively about how can we facilitate a person on, let's just say, an average or a normal income to own a property. That's not in their interests. And yet it's not as if I'm going in with a charity or an NGO mindset. Everybody is making money from this cycle, but it's fair, as opposed to what you usually see. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn now, but what you usually see is the developer is going to maximize how much money they can make depending on the market, and therefore they're not giving any consideration to the fact that we could actually make this affordable to a lower income group. And I don't know if you want to talk about the government's policy on affordable housing, because that's another subject altogether. And whether you want to go there or not is up to you.
I have a follow-on question, Grant, to what you've said. So my question then would be, or what I would want you to speak into would be, if there are 35,000 mortgages, 50,000, 70,000 based on the frame of mind, could it be that, talking of opportunities, what you're describing might bring less individual return, but then economics of scale could take the number of people that could buy a house from 35,000 to 3.5 million, if understanding came of the quality of the products. So actually developers could get actually in the long term richer, because they will be selling to more people at a lower entry level. That's my thinking. So could you speak into that? Do you think there's potential for that in the market? Are there 3.5 million people, for instance, who, if the products were available, the kind of products you're talking about, would take it up?
Right. So I'm not sure I heard all of that completely clearly. You're referring to the 35,000 people that currently have mortgages in Kenya.
No, so I'm using that as just randomly as a number. I'm saying developers go for a kill, but we now know that despite all their killing, there is only 35,000 people that sold to, or 50,000 people. But if we were able to shift the mind, you were talking about opportunities. Johnny was asking about opportunities. If we were able to shift the mindset and say, hey guys, you might sell to 35,000 at this high interest, but what if we were able to bring down the access level? We could actually sell to 3.5 million, which means 10 years down the road, you would actually be a wealthier developer. So I'm saying, do you think that that kind of opportunity could exist if people could be educated, if a shift could happen, if capital could go in a lot of education, marketing, stuff like that, from a Kenya perspective? Or do you think that you don't have that many people that need a rent to own products, so it's not really viable at scale?
No, I mean, in answer to that last point, there is definitely the demand there. That's not the issue. As I've already explained, there it's a growing population, and with a growing population, there has to be demand. And as with probably most African countries, there is significant migration into the cities, rather than staying in their ancestral home and being dependent on farming. So there's no question about the demand. The challenge for the banks is I forget what it's called, but basically the standard Kenyan bank lending rate, which they're governed by, which is determined by the Treasury, which they then obviously charge in addition to that in order to be able to make their money. But I also think that the whole process, and I'm speaking a little bit naively here, you've introduced me as an expert. I'm not an expert on mortgages. Is the whole process of applying and getting approved for a mortgage just seems so archaic. And I mean, in some of the projects that we worked with, which is diversifying a little bit, but I think it's on the same subject. The banks are just they're so cautious, but they're also ruthless. And so what happened when we had bank finance is that if you've got any delay, then you've got to be covering financing facilities in the region of 20%. Well, in that world, you've got to be making 30 or 35% profit in order to be able to cover a margin of 20% just for the cost of your money. And that's, to my mind, it's just not realistic. So therefore, I mean, what was also interesting about that is everybody thinks that a contractor or a developer is making an absolute fortune, and it's not true. So whenever I get approached about building a house, and they say to me, "Oh, how much would it cost to build a house?" and I tell them, "Oh, we can do it for a third of that price." And everybody thinks that contractors are making an absolute fortune, but they are not. And the challenge of making life work at those rates of 20% then comes down to the whole factor of how much do I now have to pay for a mortgage in order to simply cover the interest cost per month. So therefore, you have to look at alternative ways of financing. And we as a business will not go back to the bank again for finance. We just won't. On one of the project where we built 110 houses down by Athi River, the bank probably made far more money out of that project than ever we did. And therefore, we are constantly looking for people who understand what they're investing in order to that there is an impact in their investing. Yes, there is a financial return, but there is an impact to that investment that has a knock-on effect for families, for lower income people, I mean, when I go into a slum in Nairobi, I do not understand how you go into a slum in the rain and everything is damp. The floor is damp, the walls are damp. How they don't all have TB, I have absolutely no idea, because they do not live in a safe environment. And that is just wrong. And therefore, we have to look at how we facilitate people to have a decent home to live in, rather than simply looking at, okay, here's a mortgage at 25%, 20%, 20% deposit. If you can't afford it, we'll go off and rent or build a tin shed in a slum.
Thank you very much, Nisi. Thank you very much, Grant. I look at the time. If you would be willing, we would love to continue that conversation another time, because you touched on there's topics I would be very excited to hear, as you said, like government programs. Why not go to the government? The websites look shiny, at least when I look at it, they look nice and shiny and easy. We haven't talked about, for investors, liquidity and access strategy. Why should a European or someone else from the world somewhere invest in Kenya? Is it safe? and some other practical things. So, and you came back. I mean, I had to finish it. You came back to your heart of, and we have to make an impact. And I love it. That's why we're doing. And it does not mean we make no money and no profit, but it shouldn't be the main goal shouldn't be maximize it. And it's also for those listening, it's not what we are there for. But yes, we are business. Of course, we need to live and we all need to make a profit. But to close it off, Grant, you have written a whole book. Do you have a encouraging story from that book that would say, yes, we can actually buy it? And I will put the link to the book in the description or comments. I would also put, if you were interested in the whole thing we talked about, rent to own. If you don't exactly know what that means, we have a video about that with another expert. I link that. We actually, the Embo project you talked about, there is online, you can go to that is live, and that can be invested in, that can be looked at, it's on the website. I also put that link in that which all YouTubers have to say, but it's there, it's just basically so you can access it. But Grant, maybe give us a story, a short one, that funny, encouraging, whatever, to end this great session.
I mean, that's an open door to ask me to talk about my book. The book is called The Accidental Social Entrepreneur, which was a title that the publisher chose. And the manuscript that I sent to the publisher was significantly longer than what the book is. And it was with her, I was introduced to the publisher through a friend who she had published a couple of his books. And so that was, in a sense, what gave me the entrance point to the publisher. And she spent 5 years working on the book, on editing and bringing the book together. And she actually came to Kenya with her husband to stay with me in Nairobi. And she said, the reason that I've come is because we get two different types of storytellers. She said, we get the ones who are over-egging the story and exaggerating what the message is. And we get others who actually are undertelling the story. As a publisher, I need to know which one you are. And I'll leave it to your imagination as to what her conclusion was. But what actually hooked her was in the first page of the book, where in the very first paragraph, I make the statement that this is a book about how God can be trusted, but he doesn't half make it hard at times. And she said, when I read that line, I thought so many people are going to identify with that line that they are going to want to read on. And that was the reason, that sentence was the reason that hooked her in the first place in order to publish the book. It is the best book that I have written. And I can thoroughly recommend that it should challenge and inspire you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grant. So if you are listening and watching and you're hooked, then stay tuned. If you're hooked to Kenya, we will hopefully follow that up in the next session and have a part 2 about Kenya. If you're hooked to the book, go and buy it. If you're hooked to some of the other stuff, look at our website. We say thank you for watching and listening, and looking forward to meet you maybe in our next expert session, or you can also join our home ownership program too, where you can get access to all of that for a small fee. Thank you very much, and goodbye from, I think today, from Germany, South Africa, and the UK, and of course talking about Kenya. Thank you and bye.
Yeah, goodbye.
Bye.